into a participant in the plot. For the first time in Black Mirror history, the screen literally asks us what to do next: eat cereal or not, talk to the father or go to the room. Every few minutes, the viewer is offered a choice that influences the story's development. But the longer the interactive game lasts, the clearer it becomes that we have no real control. The illusion of freedom essentially extends the theme the series has explored since its first season. How much do we own ourselves in a world where technology decides for us? The plot unfolds in 1984 and follows young programmer Stefan, who creates a game based on the book Bandersnatch, a story where the reader chooses the hero's path. Immersed in his project, Stefan gradually loses the boundary between game and reality. He suspects someone is controlling his actions, and this paranoia turns into a nightmare where choices become increasingly grim and meaningless. Brooker builds a meta-labyrinth with devilish humor. The film is ostensibly about a game designer creating a branching path game from a book, but it itself becomes such a structure. In short, the cinema truly mocks the viewer. Triangle of Sadness is a biting satire on privileges and class madness, directed by Swedish filmmaker Ruben Östlund, master of awkwardness and social shame. Following Force Majeure and The Square, he thrusts characters into situations where hypocrisy and self-satisfaction are swept away by a wave of absurdity, and a literal wave as well. This time, the fashion industry is targeted, where beauty is currency and self-esteem depends on likes. In the plot, young model couple Carl and Yaya receive a free ticket on a luxurious cruise. Along with them aboard are eccentric millionaires, a Russian oligarch, arms dealers, and a philosophizing Marxist captain who drinks cognac and quotes Marx with the same ease as guests down champagne. However, this perfect showcase of glamour collapses quickly. The sea rages, masks slip, and the overly sweet dinner turns everyone inside out, metaphorically and literally. When equilibrium between classes and genders is finally lost, people accustomed to managing others must learn to survive without servants and status. Here, Östlund returns to his favorite theme, the fragility of human dignity, which vanishes faster than a camera flash. The Zone of Interest is a film that shatters the conventional perception of war dramas. Glazer eschews tragedy, replacing it with horrifying ordinariness. Instead of victims suffering, there's the well-being of the executioners. Instead of screams, the sounds of everyday life drown out others' pain. The cameras capture how the commandant of Auschwitz concentration camp and his family breakfast, stroll in the garden, and discuss mundane matters, while beyond the wall, furnaces burn and cries echo. This contrast between ideal and hell makes The Zone of Interest not just a film, but an icy examination of humanity's ability to ignore evil when it becomes part of routine. The plot focuses on the Höss family, Rudolf, the commandant, and his wife Hedvig. Their life is structured with pedantic precision. The children study, the household prospers, guests arrive for dinners. Only a blank wall separates this cozy home from the factory of death where bodies are burned daily. Hedvig happily uses the clothing of the murdered, dreaming of a spa trip, while Rudolf, cold and focused, strives for promotion, unquestioning in his duty. When circumstances force him to leave, their world begins to crumble, not from conscience, but from the threat of losing accustomed comfort. Tar is an intellectual drama about power, talent, and destruction disguised as a biopic that does not actually exist. Todd Field creates not a film about music, but a symphony of vanity and moral decay, where every pause resounds louder than the orchestra. Cate Blanchett as Lydia Tarr seems to conduct not only the orchestra, but the film itself, building the narrative rhythm with mathematical precision. Her character is the embodiment of modern genius on the brink of mania, a woman accustomed to controlling everything except her own downfall. The plot follows star conductor Lydia Tarr, whose success begins to crumble after the death of her former assistant. Rumors of power abuses and relationships with young musicians gradually turn into open persecution. Simultaneously, Lydia loses her family, friends, and career control. Her attempt to promote a talented cellist becomes the final nail in her reputation's coffin. Drive My Car is a 3-hour confession about guilt, loss, and the ability to speak when words no longer matter. Ryosuke Hamaguchi transforms Murakami's story into a leisurely cinematic novel where theater becomes a mirror of life, and every line sounds like an act of reconciliation with the past. Hamaguchi directs with Chekhovian gentleness and Japanese restraint, showing how pain, hidden beneath politeness and routine, gradually dissolves in the communication of two people who find themselves together by chance. One is theater director Yusuke, who lost his wife, with whom he shared not only feelings but also torturous misunderstanding. To cope with the loss, he stages Uncle Vanya at a theater festival and receives a personal driver, the taciturn girl Misaki. Between them, a quiet kinship gradually emerges. Both have endured loss, both fear speaking of it, and both seek a way to survive after everything important in life has already been said. Through multilingual rehearsals, nighttime drives, and restrained confessions, Hamaguchi shows how art becomes the only way to live on. When Misaki drives the car and Yusuke recites Chekhov's lines, it seems they're controlling not the automobile, but their own pain, and finally find the road home. Her is a rare example of science fiction where technology serves not as a cause for alarm, but as a mirror for the soul. Spike Jonze creates a future world in which neon minimalism and smart devices have become part of everyday life, yet loneliness remains humanity's eternal companion. The protagonist, Tedor Twombly, earns his living by writing letters for others, as if feeling on behalf of those who have forgotten how to feel. When a new operating system named Samantha, voiced by Scarlett Johansson, endowed with intelligence and charm, enters his life, a story of love unfolds between them. Pure, sincere, but impossible. The virtual becomes intimate and the human fragile as never before. Despite its techno-futurism, the film is not about artificial intelligence, but rather about the human heart. A tender and bitter film about how relationships change when one partner grows faster than the other, even if that partner is not human. Samantha, evolving, transcends human perception, while Tedor remains where he always was, amid his letters, words, and memories.
The Handmaiden is a film where passion and deception transform into an exquisite dance, and every character movement conceals a double bottom. Park Chan-wook, master of genre transformations, combines Victorian romance, psychological thriller, and sensual melodrama, creating a picture about power and liberation. His Handmaiden is not just a love story, but a complex chess game between deception and sincerity, between mistress and maid, society dictating roles, and the individual breaking free from shackles. The plot begins with Korean girl Sukshi being hired as a maid to Japanese heiress Hideko, living under the tyranny of her uncle in a luxurious mansion. In reality, Sukshi is a plant in a scheme by a cunning con artist planning to marry Hideko to seize her wealth. The maid must gain the lady's trust and convince her to wed the imposter. But instead of cold calculation, feelings ignite between the women, capable of ruining all plans. When the truth emerges, everyone, including the viewer, is deceived. Park Chan-wook divides the story into 3 acts, each overturning the perception of the previous. Far from a simple love drama, it is an elegant parable about freedom, solidarity, and the art of dealing with those accustomed to owning others. The Father is a rare example of how personal drama transforms into an almost thriller-like experience. Florian Zeller, adapting his own play, achieves the impossible by placing us inside the consciousness of a person losing touch with reality. Instead of relatives' familiar sufferings or sentimental tears over fading memory, we find ourselves captive to confusion, fear, and mere fragments of recollections. The space that seems a cozy apartment suddenly changes. Walls appear to breathe, loved ones' faces become strangers, and reality tangles in time loops. All this is filmed without excess, but precisely, as if the viewer themselves is slowly losing ground. The protagonist, Anthony Hopkins, is an elderly man living in London. He is stubborn, refuses to acknowledge his weakness, and rejects help despite his daughter Anne's pleas. However, as time passes, it becomes evident that the familiar order is collapsing. Items are out of place, unfamiliar people appear in the house, and conversations repeat like echoes. Anthony increasingly fails to understand where he is, in his own apartment or already at his daughter's. Is it morning today or yesterday evening? Zeller tells the story from the hero's perspective, forcing us to feel the same anxiety and helplessness when reality ceases to obey logic. Of course, Oppenheimer, a monumental, almost echoing film about the man who created the sun and forever deprived humanity of sleep. Oppenheimer transforms a history from a physics textbook into a philosophical drama about guilt, genius, and destruction. His Oppenheimer is not merely a biopic about the father of the atomic bomb, but a somber hymn to human intellect, capable of creating both divinity and apocalypse. Nolan structures the narrative as a scientific experiment. Past and present collide like particles in an accelerator, generating pure fear. There are no explosions for spectacle's sake, only internal catastrophes where conscience burns brighter than any nuclear flash. The plot spans Robert Oppenheimer's life from his youth in Berkeley to his involvement in the Manhattan Project and subsequent moral collapse. The scientist immerses himself in creating the first atomic bomb, intended to end the war and usher in a new era of responsibility for one's own mind. Around him are colleagues, officials, spies, and enemies, each ready to sell an idea for power. After the Trinity test in the